MADA. We are your key to the automotive industry. Education, services, resources. MADA, Missouri. Automobile Dealers Association. MADA, new employee video.
As a new employee, let me welcome you to this dealership. As you begin your job here, there are some very important things that we need to cover, including how to be safe at your job. It is our standing policy that all employees work as safely as possible. As an employee, you have a responsibility to work safely, but you also have our promise that we will provide a workplace environment that is safe and healthy for you to work in. In this video, we are going to talk for a few minutes about what this all means. Both you and the dealership have an important safety role to play. It is extremely important to us that our employees work with the highest regards for safety and to understand that safety is not just a catchphrase around here. It's an essential part and a responsibility of your job. We do not expect safety to be the flavor of the month. We expect safety to be a way of life while you are employed here. To start, let's talk about what you can expect from us. This dealership will try to provide a working environment for you that is as safe and healthful as possible. In order for us to do this the best that we can, we must have your help. First, we need you to understand that safety on the job is for your benefit. Accidents and injuries cost this dealership big dollars and affect our ability to provide equipment, additional employees, and raises for existing employees. Insurance is one of the greatest expenses this dealership has and are staggering enough when we don't have accidents. But when we do, these costs skyrocket, making it extremely difficult to provide the equipment you need, and sometimes even makes it difficult to keep from having to lay off employees. But more importantly than all of this is that accidents on the job affect you. You are the one that will suffer the pain, mental anguish, and possible permanent disability that accidents cause. You are your first line of defense in protecting yourself from injury. Let's talk about two very important things that affect your safety. Issues that directly influence the chances of you being injured in an accident on the job. These two things are the attitude that you have at work and your work habits. Having a good attitude may be the single most valuable asset you have to work safely. It dictates whether or not you follow established safety rules and policies, and whether you use safety equipment that is provided or take unnecessary chances that increase the likelihood of you being injured on the job. Safety starts with your attitude. Simply deciding to use safety equipment, to wear personal protective equipment when necessary, to keep your work areas clean, and to not take any unnecessary chances on the job will go a long way toward keeping you safe. As a matter of fact, these simple things can prevent the majority of accidents. Good work habits generally produce not only the safest way to do a job, but also the most efficient way to do a job. Practicing good work habits daily helps prevent accidents. Let's face it, good work habits are definitely habits that you can live with. As an employee of this dealership, the types of injuries that you are most likely to suffer are injuries to your eyes, your fingers, or your hands. As a matter of fact, eyes, fingers, and hands account for 1/2 of all injuries. By far, the most debilitating injury that you could have working here is a sprain or a strain to your back, shoulder, or knee. These injuries are the most disabling and the most costly, both to you as the employee and to the dealership. Fortunately, there are things that you can do to prevent these kinds of injuries. First, common sense says that you should wear your eye protection anytime the conditions indicate. If you are working with chemicals, using air tools, grinding, welding, chipping, beating on something, or working under a vehicle, you must use the proper eye protection. There are several different types of eye protection provided, so it's important that you know which one is appropriate for the job that you'll be doing. Also, protect your hands and fingers when working. Be sure to use the proper type of glove when necessary. If for any reason you do not have the right kind of eye protection or gloves, tell your supervisor immediately. To prevent strains and sprains, remember to use your head. Don't lift heavy or bulky items by yourself. Use a lift, jack, or hoist, or at the least, get help. Here are some quick tips on preventing strains and sprains. Always use proper lifting techniques and get help if necessary. Know where you are going to set down your load and make sure that the pathway is clear. Don't carry heavy or bulky items through spills on the floor, over wet floors or ice where you might slip. Remember that when it's cold outside, your muscles contract and are more susceptible to sprains. If you feel tightness or a twinge in your muscles, stretch out like an athlete before heavy lifting. Never lift, push, or pull anything if there's a lift, hoist, jack, or pusher that can do it for you. Use the equipment that's been provided for you to do the job safely. Preventing strains and sprains also include keeping yourself in good physical shape. If you're out of shape and carrying a few extra pounds, that's more weight that your body has to lift.
Dealership policies.
As an employee of this dealership, you have several responsibilities that you need to be aware of. First, this dealership does not condone the use of illegal drugs or alcohol. Employees are not allowed to consume alcohol or illegal drugs on the dealership premises. Further, employees are not allowed to report to work under the influence of alcohol or illegal drugs. Employees that do may be subject to disciplinary action up to and/or including termination. Just as intoxication from drugs or alcohol can impair your judgment and make you more likely to be in an accident, an intoxicated coworker can also cause you to be hurt on the job. If you see a coworker that you think may be intoxicated, you should tell your supervisor as soon as you can. Next, you need to make sure you report any injuries that you have to your supervisor immediately, regardless of how minor you might think the injury is. Failure to report injuries can cause a delay in you receiving the medical treatment that you need, and in some cases can cause you to have to pay for your own medical treatment. This dealership has a pre-selected medical provider for employee injuries. All medical treatment for injuries must be authorized by the dealership. Should you choose to seek medical treatment for an injury that is not authorized by the dealership, you may be required to pay for the treatment yourself. If you are injured in the job, the dealership reserves the right to assign you to a temporary position or to modify your job temporarily in accordance with the restrictions placed by the physician or the healthcare provider that is treating you. You need to understand that these positions are only temporary and are not a permanent job reassignment. If at any time you find a piece of equipment that is broken or unsafe, you should report that equipment to your supervisor as soon as possible. You are the expert in your job, and you will see the equipment and machinery that needs repair faster than your supervisor will. We rely on you to report this equipment as soon as possible so that repairs can be made. Further, if you have suggestions on equipment that you feel would make your job safer or more efficient, please let your supervisor know that also. This dealership provides many different types of personal protective equipment for you to use, including protective clothing, gloves, hearing protection, safety glasses, goggles and face shields, and other equipment as necessary. You are expected to use this equipment as necessary while doing your job to protect yourself. If you have a problem with damaged or worn out personal protective equipment, let your supervisor know as soon as possible so that the dealership can get you a replacement. Earlier, we talked about the type of injuries that you must be especially careful to try to avoid. However, you also need to be aware of one of the things that causes the most fatalities in a dealership: driving a vehicle without your seatbelt fastened. The person that was driving this vehicle is lucky to be alive. However, he may never walk again. Although it's the law, it's also a stringent policy of this dealership that you wear your seatbelt anytime you are operating or riding in a vehicle, whether it's dealership owned, a customer's, or even if it's your own vehicle and you're on company business. Occasionally, you may have an injury at home or may be prescribed drugs by your personal physician that could affect your ability to work safely at your job, such as driving a vehicle. If at any time you have an injury or are taking any medication that could affect your safety or the safety of one of your coworkers, you must let your supervisor know immediately so that temporary accommodations can be made for you if necessary and if possible. There are certain hazards that are specific to the job that you will be performing for this dealership. After viewing this video and prior to being assigned to your job, your supervisor will get with you to review the hazards particular to your job and how to work safely with the equipment and machinery, chemicals, and all of the safety devices and tools necessary to be safe.
Safety equipment.
Now let's talk about all of the different safety equipment that exists around our dealership for your use. First, let's take a look at the machine guards. Machine guards exist to protect you from accidentally coming in contact with moving machinery. Machine guards found around the dealership include tool rests and guards on bench grinders, covers on fans, and covers on belts and pulleys. At no time should you remove or tamper with a guard on any piece of equipment. This could allow you to accidentally come in contact with the moving parts, causing a nasty injury. Other important pieces of safety equipment in this dealership are the safety latches and locks on our vehicle lifts. These latches help to prevent a vehicle from falling from a lift, quite possibly on top of your head. Never ever should you remove or disengage a safety latch from a lift. If you see a lift that has safeties that have broken or have been removed, you must report the lift immediately to your supervisor so that repairs can be arranged for, or if necessary, so that the lift can be temporarily taken out of service until it can be repaired. If you find it necessary to use a jack instead of a lift to raise a vehicle, make absolutely sure that you place jack stands under the vehicle while it is on the jack. Place the stands and lower the vehicle gently until it is resting on the jack and the stands at the same time. You should also chalk the wheels of the vehicle after you have raised it to ensure that it cannot roll off the jack and the jack stands while you are underneath it. And common sense says that you should not put any part of your body under a car on a jack that is not necessary. No matter how long you are going to be under a vehicle on a jack, even if just for a minute, use a jack stand and chalk the vehicle's wheels. Safety glasses, face shields, hearing protection, gloves, respirators, dust masks, and protective clothing are also safety equipment that you need to use when necessary. In most cases, the dealership provides this equipment. Your supervisor will explain to you what types of PPE are necessary and available, and will let you know when you are expected to use it. It is your responsibility to remember what kind of PPE you need to use and when, and to make sure that you have the appropriate PPE that you need to use, and that it's in good working condition. If you do not have some PPE that you need, let your supervisor know as soon as possible. This dealership also provides first aid equipment, fire extinguishers, eye wash stations, and spill prevention and cleanup equipment for your use. Make sure you know where it's all located. Take a minute or two to find the eye wash station and the closest fire extinguisher to you in case you need to locate them quickly in an emergency.
Specific dealership hazards.
There are some specific hazard areas in this dealership that you need to be made aware of. Chemicals, operating vehicles, lifts, fires, housekeeping, eye injuries, and back injury prevention are among a few that we need to talk about briefly. To start, let's talk about working with chemicals safely. Hazardous chemicals are found literally everywhere throughout this facility in at least some amount. These chemicals can cause burns or explosions, may be corrosive, could be toxic to you, and in some cases can even cause cancer if used improperly. Because of this, it is vital that you know how to work with the chemicals. This dealership maintains material safety data sheets, or MSDSs, on all chemicals that we use. You need to know where the MSDSs are kept and what information you will find in them. The MSDSs will tell you what types of precautions to take while using the chemical and what kinds of PPE you need to wear while working with the chemical. Also, make sure that you read the chemical's label on the container and abide by all warnings. There are several different types of vehicle lifts, and the dealership utilizes more than one type. If your job requires that you use a lift, it's very important that you become familiar with the lifts that the dealership has and how to properly operate them. Your supervisor will get with you on how to safely use the lift before you start your job. If your job duties do not normally include operating a lift, under no circumstances are you allowed to operate a lift. Never use a lift or any other piece of equipment in this dealership unless you have been properly trained in its use. If you have any questions about operating a piece of equipment in this dealership, ask your supervisor. Now let's talk about one of the biggest causes of accidents in the dealership: housekeeping. Cords and hoses across walkways, tools left on the floor, and spills that are not cleaned up immediately cause serious slips, trips, and falls that could be fatal. According to the National Safety Council, falls are the third most common cause of fatalities in dealerships. It is imperative that you practice good housekeeping in your area. Clean up spills as soon as they happen, and keep tools and materials picked up and out of walkways. Don't store items on the treads of stairways, and make sure that all aisles or exits are kept completely clear and accessible. Also, don't forget emergency equipment like fire extinguishers, eye wash stations, and yes, even circuit breakers. All of this equipment must remain completely clear and accessible at all times. While we were talking about falls, we need to also talk a moment about water and ice. During the winter months, the occurrence of slip and fall injuries in a dealership goes way up, usually because of the employees trying to run or hurry on ice or on a wet floor, employees wearing the wrong kinds of shoes for the environment they are in, or failing to clean up spills and keep tiled floors clean and dry. To prevent slips and falls, here are some common sense reminders. Make sure you keep the floors in your work areas clean and dry. Wear shoes that are appropriate for your work area. Don't wear open-toed shoes if you work in parts, service, detail, or in the body shop. If you work in detail or in any other area where there may be water or other liquids on the floor, wear shoes with a slip-resistant rubber sole. When walking on snow or ice, don't wear dress shoes with leather soles or high-heeled shoes. Wear snowshoes or boots. Change back into your dress shoes when you come inside. If you do have to walk on snow, ice, or across a wet floor, walk carefully and deliberately. Don't rush or hurry. At this point, we need to talk a bit about preventing fires. Obviously, the best fire is one that never happens. If your job requires you to work with flammable chemicals or with a welder or cutting torch, you have a huge responsibility to protect yourself as well as your co-workers from an unintentional fire. When welding, grinding, or cutting, common sense dictates not to do this around any kind of flammable or combustible materials. For instance, don't grind around a pile of oily rags. Don't smoke while mixing paint, dropping a fuel tank, or changing a fuel filter. And don't cut or weld on a drum, fuel tank, or other type of container that may hold any flammable liquid. Here are some other quick pointers for preventing fires. Don't use an incandescent drop light anywhere near gasoline or other flammable liquids. Don't use an incandescent drop light to service a fuel filter, pump, or gas tank. Keep circuit breakers clear and accessible. Don't store flammable or combustible materials underneath any kind of electrical panel. When welding, cutting, or grinding, make sure to keep a fire extinguisher handy. Watch where you smoke. This dealership has specific areas that are designated for smoking. You can only smoke in these areas. Your supervisor will let you know where you can and cannot smoke. Keep ground wires on all containers of flammable liquids when transferring liquid to and from the container. This includes all containers of paint, drums of windshield washer fluid or brake cleaner, and the gas buggy when draining a fuel tank for service. Keep shop rags stored only in the UL-approved metal container with lids. Do not store oily or dirty shop rags in cardboard boxes, milk crates, or buckets. Know where the nearest fire extinguisher is and how to use it. To wrap up, let's touch again on preventing back injuries and sprains and strains to the knees, shoulders, and neck as well. These injuries are the most painful and debilitating injuries that you could suffer here. This dealership provides lifts, hoists, jacks, and other equipment to help you with lifting. If you have to lift a heavy or bulky item, use a piece of equipment instead of putting yourself at risk of an injury. If you can't use equipment for a particular lift for whatever reason, get help. Don't lift a bulky, heavy, or awkward object by yourself. Remember that the prevention of back injuries begins with you. Use the proper equipment and the proper techniques for lifting when you do have to lift manually. Well, this wraps up the safety portion of our video. As you learn your job here, it is important to be familiar with the hazards associated with your job so that you can work safely. Know how to protect yourself and know what safety equipment is available and when it should be used. Abide by all safety rules and policies the dealership has, and remember that these rules and policies can change as needed. Don't take unnecessary chances with your safety. Remember that the best tool you have available to you for preventing accidents in the dealership is your head. Use it.
Workers' compensation.
As an employee, this dealership provides workers' compensation insurance for you should you be injured while on the job. There are some very important things that you need to know regarding this coverage. First, although it's regulated by the state, workers' compensation is not a benefit the government provides with your tax money. This insurance is purchased by the dealership. Any claims that the dealership has affects the cost of the premium that the dealership pays for this insurance and can affect the ability of the dealership to give raises, purchase new equipment, or even hire additional employees. Obviously, it benefits everyone for the dealership to be accident-free. If you are injured while on the job, workers' compensation will pay all of the necessary medical treatments to heal you and get you back to work as soon as possible. If the treating physician or clinic takes you off work, after a certain period of time, you will receive a portion of your normal wages while you are off work as allowed by state law. You do need to understand that if you are placed off work by the treating physician, the dealership reserves the right to reassign you to a temporary modified job that is within the restrictions placed by the treating physician. This position will be temporary in nature and may not be your normal job or duties. It may not even be a full 8 hours a day. This position could be changed, modified, or continued until you are released back to full duty as necessary. If you are injured on the job, you must report the injury immediately to your supervisor, regardless of how severe or minor you think the injury is. Immediately reporting injuries enables the dealership to take any corrective actions necessary quickly to prevent similar accidents in the future. Immediate reporting also allows us to put our insurance carrier on notice. This protects you in case you initially do not think that the injury is very severe, but later start to develop problems. You need to know that failure to report an injury immediately could cause you to lose some or all of your workers' compensation benefits. If your injury is not reported immediately, our insurance carrier may question whether or not your injury actually occurred at the dealership, and it could be denied. After you have reported your injury, with your input, your supervisor and the dealership claims coordinator will determine if medical treatment for your injury is necessary. Sometimes they may elect to send you for medical treatment simply as a precaution. You need to know that this dealership has a medical provider pre-selected for treating workplace injuries. Our workers' compensation insurance will not pay for medical treatment that you sought on your own that was not authorized by the dealership. Any medical treatment sought that is not authorized will be at your own cost. Remember that safety devices provided and established safety rules and procedures exist to protect you. If you are injured while failing to use a safety device that is required, or because you failed to follow an established safety rule, policy, or procedure, your workers' compensation benefits will be reduced as allowed by law. Any portion of the bills for your injury that are reduced will be your responsibility because you failed to follow an established rule or to use a safety device that was required. In the event of a serious injury, these costs to you could be substantial. Remember that this dealership cannot and does not tolerate the use of alcohol or illegal drugs in the workplace. You may be required to submit to a drug and/or alcohol test during your initial medical treatment for any workplace injury. If your results come back positive, you will be subject to disciplinary action up to and including immediate termination. Further, your workers' compensation benefits can also be reduced or denied completely if the drug or alcohol use was found to be the proximate cause of your injuries. Workers' compensation insurance exists for your benefit, but unfortunately, just like any other good thing, it often gets abused. Occasionally, employees will fake an injury or will exaggerate the extent of an injury that really happened. Fraud costs everyone. It costs our insurance carrier because of increased claims and claim costs. It costs the dealership in increased premiums, labor costs, and reduced productivity. And it even affects you simply because fraud is someone stealing a benefit that you receive and can affect your ability to get raises, tools, and equipment that you might need. For these reasons, workers' compensation fraud is very serious and will not be tolerated by this dealership. Any employee that is found to fraudulently claim an injury or misrepresent the extent of an injury may be subject to disciplinary action up to and including termination and will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Employees that attempt to defraud the system hurt the dealership and other employees. If you know of anyone who is attempting to abuse the system in any way, you should let your supervisor know as quickly and discreetly as possible. Should you have any questions about the workers' compensation process, you can contact your supervisor or the dealership claim coordinator. Remember that you can also contact our workers' compensation carrier or the State Division of Workers' Compensation for questions or concerns.